Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up during inflation, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See detail.
Ampire.
Hey babies, hey babies, hey babies. Hi everyone. What's up, Callow? How you doing there? How you doing there, hon?
Pretty good. Caps, 4-game win streak, baby.
I know.
Pretty
They're
good.
rolling.
Pretty
They're
good
rolling
right now. I'm starting to feel the magic a little bit, just a little bit.
And Muriel's giving me all my money too, Michael. It's wonderful.
What about that other
days?
What about the other franchise? What about that extension?
They start. I looked it up because I didn't even know. They start tomorrow night. I just want to look it up. Like, when do they actually play? Because I'm like, oh, the NBA started last night. When do the Wizards play? Tomorrow night. I found out this morning. So gives me another day where I don't have to speak about them. One more day, and then I'll have to give what prediction would I give for the Wizards season anyway? Like, I don't even know what the over-under on wins is. It's got to be in the 20s, right? Something like that. It's got to be.
Assume so. And last year, I think we were like right on. I think the over-under was 14.5. And didn't it end up being 14? I think it was.
I feel like I remember saying, there's no way they're only going to win 14. Like, that's just stupid.
And I pushed back, and I was like, nope, they're going to be bad. And I think it did come down to like the last week of the season. They had 13 or 14 wins. I don't even remember how many games they won. That's how bad it was.
Whatever, man. We got other good things going on right now. They could just stay under the radar all they want. They can stay under the radar. All right, let me start with the Commanders. This happened late in the afternoon, and we didn't have a chance to talk about it yesterday, but Jamin Davis was released. Predictably, everybody's just point out all the draft picks that aren't here anymore with no nuance, but fine. I've lived in this cycle too. I will push back on that in a minute because I hate when people do this because they're all different cases, right? Like, he didn't work out. I agree with you. Chase Young is not the same thing. Neither is Montez Sweat. I wish everybody would stop putting everything into the same bucket, but whatever. Let me just talk about him for a moment. So they drafted him. I mean, it's weird. They said they wanted him to be a middle linebacker. He wasn't that in college. And then famously, we found out very quickly that the coaches at Kentucky didn't think he would be a middle linebacker. And I think told this staff this, and they didn't want to hear it and tried to put him into it anyway. And it didn't really work out. So then they moved him back to outside linebacker. And the thing that was frustrating about Jamin was, and I used to say this all the time, behind Chase Young, he's the second best athlete on the field. So it's hard not to want him out there, even if he's messing up over and over, because he's so incredibly athletic and his speed is so evident on the field. And when he's just going, he is going. This staff comes in, they're ripping everything up, tearing it down to the studs, but he does have a year left on his contract. They obviously weren't going to pick up his 5th-year extension because why would you? He hasn't proven anything yet. And why would you put guaranteed money on him? Because it's a number 1 draft pick. So they had to make the choice not to do it. And then they decided in the spring, we're going to give a shot for him at rush end, which clearly was a open, like, where is the pass rush going to come from? Which oddly has happened over the last 4 weeks. One of the questions that they're answering, but that's what they decided to do. And to Jamin's credit, he was totally open to it. Like, I talked to him a number of times in the spring and the summer. I think he knew he might get cut if he just stayed at linebacker or pushed back against it. But he said he wanted to do it. And Ryan Kerrigan worked with him a lot and a ton. And then the summer rolled around, and what became evident was you can't just teach like pass rush moves to somebody overnight who's never really played the position before. And here's the other thing I want to say about him, because I think I want to be fair to him. Like, he weighs somewhere in the 235, 240 range, like the normal size for a linebacker. But just for comparison, Dante Fowler weighs 265. Dorrance Armstrong is heavier than that. Cleveland Farrell is like 265. For Jamin Davis to be good at this, okay, one, he would have had to have learned some really great, almost unstoppable rush moves that used his speed, because he's undersized now at this position. So I want to at least acknowledge that he tried to do something that was going to be an uphill climb from the jump, because he was going to have a massive disadvantage in size. And he tried, and they let him try, and they gave him run. And as it turned out, he just wasn't at this juncture good enough to be on the field very much at this position. He'd be a liability. He's not going to be able to get to the quarterback. These tackles are going to swallow him up. Every once in a while, he's a really good, quick, swift play, but like, they clearly didn't trust him to be on the field in that position. And with Jordan McGee coming back off IR, now all of a sudden there's not even room to move him back to linebacker. So that's why he's gone. And for this year, that's why this staff let him go. And I know everybody wants to just put the bucket in another failed first-round pick, but that's what he tried to do. I give him credit for trying to do it. I think it was going to be a really hard thing to be able to actually get good at really quickly. And the clock was ticking on him out yesterday.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I give him credit for doing this. And also, I think this coaching staff has kind of like played their hand on, if they like you or not, they'll keep you around. Like, the fact that he stuck around for this long, for almost halfway through the season, tells me that the coaching staff also respected what work he was trying to put in to try to switch positions and gave him a chance to do so. But I'm with you. They knew he was probably going to be a liability out there. Plus, the pass rush started coming on, so it became kind of a luxury here. I give Jamin all the credit in the world. We kind of talked about this with Forbes, right? Where Forbes wasn't kind of dwelling on last year. He was kind of trying to move on in the preseason, and we talked about that. Like, I think this coaching staff, they pretty much said to him, you're not going to make it as a linebacker, but we'll give you a chance here. And he tried, and it didn't work out. And look, this is what happens too. You just become the bottom of the roster. You got to get moved around when these injuries or suspensions pop up. And that's what Jamin ended up becoming. And I'm with you too. I don't really lump Sweat into the failed first round picks, because I think that was a different scenario.
He's not one.
Right. Exactly. Right.
He's not
exactly.
one. Yeah.
Not being on the roster, sure, it counts towards the stats. Same thing with Chase. Chase was a different scenario than all the other ones. But from then on, from Jamin on, then we can have the conversation. But I'm with you. Like, this was one where Jamin was never a bad guy, and I think that's what got him probably to this point anyways. And I wish him all the luck in the world. I hope, he fits in somewhere. Maybe he can be a special teamer or something.
I think this staff has been, at least to this point, and I don't have to ask the players more, but just from my perspective and watching it, they've been honest and transparent with certainly with the media. I mean, like, I'm surprised how openly honest and transparent they typically are. Like, they're not going to tell you exactly what's wrong with Jaden Daniels. They shouldn't tell you exactly what's wrong with Jaden Daniels, but they're honest and open about what they're trying to do, where their faults are, how they're trying to get better. They'll use terminology that's very grounded in reality. Also, and I think this is where they're fair, and they talk about this as being people who want to work with people and not just parts, and not just be kind of callous and cold to it. If you are willing and open to working with them, they're willing and open to working with you. But this is a rough business. Like, you got to have results, and this was going to be an uphill climb for him to try to do this. I appreciated that he wanted to. I agreed that the coaches were like, we're either going to cut him or we're going to take a shot with this, and let's see if we can get something out of him. And there were a couple glimmers of hope in the preseason where I went, okay, he had a couple of plays where his speed really took over. But on the whole, I'd have to really go back and watch. But my guess is he's so undersized at that position that 9 times out of 10, he's just going to get swallowed up. And that part, I think probably for him, he had to know that going in. Even like, he's working with Kerrigan. Kerrigan's one of the greats of this organization. Incredible pass rush skills. Kerrigan was at the time. He's no longer. He lost a lot of weight. But like, at the time, much bigger than this. He wasn't 230 pounds. Like, Ryan Kerrigan was like 270, 280. Like, it's a hard thing to ask somebody that size to do. So it was hard to do. All right, back to the whole, let's lump this in with all of Ron's errors of the past. Can we at least take them one by one, just for a moment? And Sweat obviously preceded Ron, okay?
Yeah.
Sweat's not a miss. Sweat was a really, really good player who just got a market level contract from another team that this one decided to not give him prematurely because they just weren't ready to do it because they hadn't made their changes yet. But I bet you, like, I don't know, maybe Adam Peters would have done this had he been in charge. And Sweat's having and you're going to see him this weekend, a very good year with Chicago. So that's not a miss. Like, he's a really good player. So they didn't miss on that. There are circumstances by which he's not here. We could argue whether he should be, but the people who were making the decision about that at the time, namely the ownership at the time, and Eugene Shen at the time, who was pointing out, we can get what we think is very good value for him, and you don't have to give him $100 million, whatever it is. And we don't know who the coach and the staff and all that stuff's going to be. So they made that decision. We can argue whether that was the right thing to do, whether they should have just waited it out or not. But he's not a failed first-round pick, no matter how you look at it. Chase Young got hurt. He got hurt badly. He suffered a very serious knee injury that took a year and a half to recover from, that caused surgeries on both of his knees to fix. And when he did come back, they found out he had a congenital neck issue that threatened his playing career, let alone coming back off the knee injury. Was he a year and a half? For about a half a season, he was. And the rest of it, he wasn't. So I'll hear out like, was he really that good? Was he not? But it's not the same thing as this. You can't judge his career. He had serious injuries. And I knew as of the summer, once I learned of what was going on, I couldn't say anything about it. But once I learned about what was going on, I'm like, they're not going to sign him to a long-term deal. In fact, I'm not sure anybody is going to sign him to a long-term deal. And you just saw what happened in New Orleans. They signed him to a 1-year incentive-laden, if you can play, off a major neck surgery deal. So that's not the same thing as this at all. Jahan, well, he's not here right now. And this staff took one look at him and said, goodbye. He was the first person to do, they were the first person to do that to. And it was shocking at the time, but go look at what his numbers are and go look how these receivers are going. So I'll hear people out to say that turned out not to be a very, very, very good pick, obviously. And Forbes, I think, let's not turn the page on him yet. It's only his second year. He was hung out to dry in a bad defense a year ago. I don't know whether he's going to turn into a really good player, but I do know that this staff, like Jamin, is willing to work with him and find out. So I'm not done on him yet. So yes, Jamin didn't work out. Jahan didn't work out. The other two, Chase has issues, and Forbes, we don't know yet. So that's where I am on the let's lump it all together that the draft picks stink narrative that I knew was going to happen with no nuance to it whatsoever.
The other argument I'll have here, I think Chase actually belongs in his own category because we've talked about it for years, was you have to remember what the stock was at the time for all these guys. Chase was bar none graded the number one defensive player in the draft. He was from here. He played at DeMatha. He's from the area. Like, that one, and they had Dwayne Haskins in the wings. Say what you want about that. But, like, they had a quarterback that they thought could be a starter down the line. So you look at... They
had a quarterback the owner wanted to be the starting quarterback. Correct. So, like, remember, like, you have to remember all this in context. Should they have taken Herbert or whatever? Yeah, I guess so. But, I mean, like, but who at the time thought that was the wrong pick? Nobody thought that.
That's right. So, like, Chase belongs in his own category, all the injury stuff aside, because that was the pick. I don't care what happens after that. That was the pick. Jamin, I also did this a little bit yesterday because, you know, one of the best bits that you can do in sports radio is go and look at who is drafted in the first round that you missed out on. Actually, go look at the back part of that first round in 2021. I think they picked Jamin at 19 overall. There wasn't actually a lot there, and a lot of the picks in that back half of the round didn't work out. Now, yes, they reached for Jamin, but there actually wasn't this like obvious glaring, oh my God, you picked Jamin and, you know, you passed up Micah Parsons, right? Parsons was drafted like 12th overall, I think, in that same draft. So with Jamin too, yeah, they reached, yeah, it didn't work out, but I also looked at it and went, they actually might not have had a better pick, or they might have gotten a marginally better pick. It actually wasn't this huge loss. Yeah. And then for the Dotson one is like the epitome of Ron. They could have had Olave, but because they traded for Wentz and lost draft picks, they traded down to get Dotson and then get the draft picks that they got back for Wentz. That to me was all Ron. I'll blame him on that one full stop, because they could have just gone with the guy that we all thought was going to be really good in Olave and just went with it. Instead, they got other picks instead. Didn't bother. None of those picks have worked out. And here we are.
That's not B-Rob? Is that B-Rob that draft or no?
Was B-Rob that one? I don't remember, to be honest.
It was. So, I can't remember. Is that a direct result of that trade? But it must have been because B-Rob was a third-round pick that year. So that
okay.
All
right. So you got a running back.
But listen, on its face, I agree with you. The decision-making behind it was a little ridiculous. And, people at that point, too, not unlike Jamin, said that they didn't say it was a huge reach, but they said it was a reach to take Dotson there. And we all knew, we're all us Twitter GMs knew Olave is going to be good. Like, it was pretty obvious. So they could have just sat there, taken him, and gotten a really good professional receiver. Instead, they traded down and were hoping that this guy's going to be that, but they did get some of the parts back. And I agree with you. It's based around making a trade that probably didn't have to happen. Like the big argument about the Wentz thing, I'm going to get to Jerry in a minute because they're killing him again over Amari Cooper from a few years ago. Like the radio station now is going, because he went after them, they're deep diving him on all the things he's done wrong over the last 5 years, which I thought was hilarious that they're doing this. But like, that was the sin of it at the time. You didn't have to trade for it. Or I think the other one was, and it was only guaranteed for that season, but they like, the argument also was, you don't even have to give him this salary. They're going to cut him. But I guess they felt like, well, we better just get him, even though in hindsight, that looks relatively ridiculous. And we still don't know the full story of who wanted him that bad, that quickly, and made them do the deal. Like, was Snyder behind that? But did Ron go to him and say, we want to get him? And he said, just do it. Like, it's very confusing about like who really would, like, nobody wanted to take the credit for that one because I think they all knew it was a grenade that was going to go off on everybody, and it did. Well, and Scott pointed it out.
Well, I mean, look at Ron. Remember, we were making fun of Ron because Ron was doing googly eyes in the club the second the offseason started. So, like, whether it was really Ron or not, or the mandate was coming down from the top, though, that never helped. That they were the weird guy in the club that was just looking for somebody for like 2 months there. That was the worst part about it. And it was like, oh God, they're going to make a trade that we're going to have to like twist that it's the only option they have. And it ended up being Wentz. So yeah.
Ron was on Tinder and then ended up at the bar at 2 a.m. anyway with whoever was left over, was really what ended up happening. He did this every year too. Remember the video that came out before they picked Forbes? He got all googly eyes about that. They like showed it and how googly eyed he was about the whole thing. Yeah, he fell in love every year. I actually think of all the things that he did that really kind of got me. And I'm like, what are you doing? Was that going everywhere, telling anybody who would listen how badly they wanted a quarterback? I mean, it was so desperate. He went to everybody, every outlet, and told the same story of how thirsty they were for really any veteran quarterback to come in there, because he was convinced if he got any veteran quarterback, they were going to the Super Bowl. He was convinced of it.
It was so weird because remember, then the report came out that it was like, yeah, they called every single team. And I think it was like Rappaport was like, yeah, they did indeed call the Chiefs and they laughed at them. Like, it was just like, so ridiculous. And then, closing time comes on at 2 a.m. and there's Carson Wentz standing there. And that's who they ended up with. Like, it was just
the Chiefs. What the Chiefs told them, they were the Chiefs were like, listen, Mahomes isn't available, but Bieniemy is. If you'd like to,
we'll think about that one. And then he came back.
All right. So off of the release of Jamin, like the obvious thing that's going to happen is Jordan McGee is going to come up, and because the window for him has to be opened now. I think they started it 3 weeks ago, and you have 3 weeks when someone comes off IR, or they have to go back to IR and they're done for the season. So he clearly is probably ready to play. And people have kind of just settled on, well, that's the move here. I don't think so, guys. Like, I think a trade's coming. Like, and I've been barking about this for a while, but like, you don't like Adam Peters didn't just release him. He certainly called around to see if anybody wanted him before he did this. This is a former first-round pick. I'm not surprised there wasn't really a market for him, but there's no chance he didn't do his due diligence and ask around, are you interested in him? And would that be for something or quote unquote someone? So that's number one. Don't think for a second that they just released him without calling around to see, does anybody want him before we do this? So that means they are engaged. All right. Not that anybody's surprised by that, but they are, and they're looking around, and the decision to release him does read a little bit to me like they are looking to upgrade a little bit, which is music to my ears, because I get laughed at a lot when I bring this up, because everybody has in their mind this idea that like, well, it's year one and we need to build for the future. And I'm like, the future's now, pal. We're 5-2 with the number one offense in the league. Why in the world would you want to waste that opportunity? Go out and do something to help them get better. And that means maybe a rental at edge rush, and definitively a trade for a corner that you could re-sign if you really like them. Like, those are the two moves that I want to see them potentially do here. And I do think this signaled to me the release of him, that they're open to finding an upgrade on the defensive line bare minimum.
Well, I think the argument here too is what we've been talking about for the last couple of weeks. All in isn't like an NBA trade. We're not trading 3 first-round picks here. We're trading a third-round pick, most likely, because that's the going rate these days.
We're not acquiring Dame Lillard, guys. Like, I'm talking about like a third-round pick for a good corner, yeah, or a low. We have 3 seventh-round picks. Give one of those up for a rental for the year because this team has a shot. I am all for something like that.
The other side of this too is like the reports this morning of the Chiefs getting Hopkins for a 4th-round pick.
Correct.
Right? Like, this is the going rate. I'm fine with this. Nobody said to trade the 1st-round pick, but I'm good with trading one of those mid-round picks. Like, let's be real here too. Peters nailed this draft. Like, I will like say that over and over again until the end of the year, that he nailed this draft. But he's not going to nail every single draft pick. Nobody does. And so that's the other side of this too, is like, you can part with one of those mid-round picks to kind of go on a run this year. And I'm with you, like, and I've been arguing it. Get somebody's number 2 corner, because they're probably going to be the starting corner here. Like,
yes,
you can do some different kind of shopping with just the state of the position on this roster.
Yes. And I also need to point this out. We have 9 draft picks right now. 9 picks won't make the team.
Right.
9 picks can't make the team, right? You have 3 7th-round picks. So 3 7th-round picks are unlikely to make the team. So you do need to move some of this stuff. It could be used for future draft picks for sure. It can, like, listen, I like having all the options with it. There's a lot of NBA teams are doing this now. They gather up all these 2nd-round picks, not because these guys are going to make the team. It's to use to keep maneuvering. It's assets. That's all it is. And that's why I keep looking at this going, don't think they're not going to do something. And I don't know Peters well, because he's actually very quiet and he doesn't really, he's nice and he's approachable, but he's not going to talk about football with anybody. Like, it's very Pentagon over there. He don't want to tell you anything, but I can just tell by being around him, he likes winning badly. He thinks this team can win. They are winning right now. We kind of laughed a little bit at the end of camp when he and Quinn both said, not only are we going to win, in the future, but we think we can win now. Look how right they are about that here early at 5-2 with the number 1 offense in the league and a defense that has been on the whole better over the last month, albeit when they played the one heavyweight, they gave up 500 yards. But in the other 3 games against, under 500 teams, they were actually really, really good. And they're actually ranked in the middle of the pack right now. Still, I feel like if they're going to really make something of this, they have to make a couple of deals. And the Davis move did signal to me a little bit that they're open and eyeing that stuff, which to me, let's go. I'm done at this point in the season talking about next year. The future is now, guys. We're 5-2. Tampa Bay's messed up. San Francisco's messed up. The Rams are messed up. Like, there's a lot of teams that we thought would be good that aren't this year. The road is wide open here. These opportunities don't come along. Nothing is guaranteed year to year. Take advantage of it. And I feel like something's coming to help this roster very, very soon.
Not to mention, on top of all of that, and I've mentioned it with the schedule coming up, the schedule, isn't the hardest in the world, but they also have 5 divisional games. So if you make a trade, that whoever they bring in is going to help you win those divisional games, which will keep the Eagles and the Cowboys at bay, depending on what happens with them. Because, look, they're both going through their own stuff right now, but the Eagles are doing what they do. They're going through adversity and still winning. That just seems to be what they do over the last 3 years. And the Cowboys, it wouldn't shock me if they turn things around, because when Jerry makes noise, sometimes that team just picks it up. And so it's not like they've got this. What I'm getting at is, this is not like some of the other divisions where, like, the NFC West right now is a mess. Like, we don't even know who's going to win that. The Rams have a losing record and they could still win that. Our division here has 3 teams that could win it, and you need to keep them at bay. So if you shore up the roster, you actually physically will play those teams down the line. It would help you down the line as well.
You think Howie Roseman isn't surveying the trade market right now?
Yeah, right.
Like,
exactly.
He's going to make that team better. Watch.
Yep.
Watch. So let's see what Peters does here. I felt like this move signaled to me, yes, like we're about to go do something.
I just want to. I need to make like a little bookmark there. I think Pentagon Peters might be your new nickname there for
Pentagon
him.
Peters.
That's because that fits. I mean, it does fit here. I'm just saying that's a good one. Pentagon Peters should be on the Chiron.
I'll run that over to them. See what they think about that. I'll get back to you on it. All right, be right back. Bray wants to show us ESPN 630 Sports Capital.
So, you want to be a marketer. It's easy. You just have to score a ton of leads and figure out a way to turn them all into customers. Plus, manage a dozen channels, write 1 million blogs, and launch 100 campaigns all at once. When that's done, simply make your socials go viral and bring in record profits. No sweat. Okay, fine. It's a lot of sweat. But with HubSpot's AI-powered marketing tools, launching benchmark-breaking campaigns is easier than ever. Get started at HubSpot.com/marketers.
All right, welcome back. Let's go through some of the trades that have happened here. DeAndre Hopkins to Kansas City. Duh. You know, like they lost Rashee Rice. They needed another receiver. Hopkins is in no man's land, and this is an easy trade to make. And everyone's pissed, I'm sure, because the Chiefs just got better again. And watch, he'll be rejuvenated and he'll be good for them. You know, to what extent, though, he's kind of at a point in his career that I do wonder, like, how much of an impact he'll make. This is kind of like Julio Jones when he went to Philadelphia, where you're like, oh, crap, Julio Jones went to Philadelphia, and then he didn't really have much of an impact. So we'll have to see what happens here, but it's just another weapon for Mahomes, and they're somehow undefeated, even though they're not even playing all that particularly well. So it just makes them better.
Yeah, this is one where, like, the joke is like, oh, if this was a headline from 2022, I think we'd all be a little bit more worried.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. This is probably going to squeeze whatever you got left out of Hopkins. Hopkins is funny, too. Like, once he left Houston, he was never really the same. He wasn't the same in Arizona, wasn't the same in Tennessee. I don't know what he actually has left in the tank, because I think those are 2 teams that I don't think really knew how to use him. So I'm not going to be surprised here if he's good, but just not great. But that's all Kansas City needs. Like, when I saw this trade, I said, that's a Kansas City type trade. They take the person that they think can be fine, and he ends up being good with them. This is the perfect trade for them.
I agree. Let's see. Cooper Kupp to who? So the Rams are going, well, he's going to make $20 million and $20 million next year. He's been injured a lot the last couple of years. Let's see what old Matty Stafford's got left to the tank. They like Puka Nacua as a number 1 for them. It isn't going very well. So this one to me does read like we're not giving him away. That if you want to give us something real for him, we'll talk to you about it. But we're not giving him away. So that's how that one reads to me, because I think this is one of those, like Hopkins or a couple of the others that have already happened. I think this would have just happened if they were willing to kind of give him away. But I bet that that's not the case here, that they probably feel like it's second round picker up. That's and which might be the reluctancy that people walk into. But if I'm Pittsburgh, I'm looking at him hardcore. If I'm Baltimore, I'm looking at him hardcore, because he's that type of player that fits in something like that. He's a physical player. He's a reliable player. Those are the 2 teams I would watch for him if they're willing to, because I like not only with what's going on with Washington and Baltimore, even more so because they've been so close and they're really go over the top, guys. Like, I don't know what you're waiting for. Don't be the Orioles. Go get the guy that's going to help you win. One more. I said this after we played them. one more big time receiver, and they're kind of too big to fail on offense. And you tell everybody else, you got to score 40 to beat us, guys. You're just going to have to score 40 to beat us. And good luck with that. So I think Baltimore and Pittsburgh are the ones that really ought to be looking at him to, I don't know if overpay is the right word, but pay more than what the going rate has been thus far for wide receivers on the market.
I think the key to this report yesterday was, between Schefter and Rappaport and all of them, was that the Rams said they'd be willing to eat the salary. And that's why I think the second round pick is actually worth the price here. Like, if they're willing to eat half the salary and you get Kupp at that price, I'm willing to talk at that point. Like, that's actually, to me, a very win-win situation. If you can get Cooper Kupp then for 12 to 13 to 14 million for 2 years, I'll roll that dice, especially if you're paying a second round pick to get the financial flexibility. So I'm with you. I looked at that and said Baltimore. I think Baltimore would benefit greatly from having him. I think you kind of circle some of these teams that maybe have injuries. Like, does Tampa get itchy and make a trade for that to try to keep it going this year? Like, if they think, and right there. And so I think that's another team that you kind of circle. I think you also have to go full chaos here. Do the Jets go all in again and try to make a trade for another shore up offensive weapon? Like, I don't think they do, but you just don't know with Woody Johnson at this point. So I think with the salary, the fact that it came out with the salary, that's what is the key here for the second round pick. And I think you're going to have a lot of teams that will actually be willing to do that.
If the Jets tried to do this, every fantasy owner in America would have to get together and veto the trade. It's there's too much collusion going on if you guys are allowed to do something like that. I agree with you about Tampa because Godwin's going to be out for the year. Evans is out for what sounds like at least a few weeks. I wrote down their schedule. Falcons, Chiefs, Niners. Like, their season could go sideways here because they don't have their stars. They clearly could win probably two of those three. I'd have a hard time if they can't score. I mean, as wonky as Kansas City's been, if you can't score, you can't beat them. So, like, you're not going to hold them to 10 points. And their defense, I've said this for a few weeks now, it's fallen out of favor the way that they play, this hyper-aggressive nature that they play. Teams are scoring on them this year. Atlanta put up 35. Baltimore ripped them apart the other day. Like, they need to back off a little bit, and that's just kind of not in Todd Bowles' DNA. Now that they can't score, their season could go off a cliff fast. So I agree, they're ones to watch if they were to make a move here too, because their season could go sideways. And it's just another example of, this is why I want Washington to be smart about it and disciplined about it, but do something, because Tampa's really good, but they're messed up now. Atlanta's very up and down. The Niners are messed up. The Rams are messed up. Dallas could be really messed up. Like, it's so obvious that the road is open for them, either through the division or to the wild card. You got the number one offense. Go get a couple of guys. Like, again, like, every example in the NFC is just leading you to believe the door is so wide open, kicking in. And that's why I want to see them do it.
Yeah. I mean, once again, smart decision-making here. And as I said, all in, what's that mean this year? Like, is all in a second round pick? I mean, then you could do far worse, but all in seems to be a fourth or a third round pick that's conditional depending on where you go, which we will all pay if they end up going deep into the playoffs. And I think we'll all be okay with that.
Yeah, especially depending on how much of that salary they're willing to eat. Baltimore, you need to call the Rams. Like, you are one premier receiver away from having an offense that's unstoppable, and you're already practically there anyway as is. But when things get tight and it gets cold and you're in the postseason and you're playing another really good team, you're going to need that other team to be forced to score 30 plus to beat you. And if you add someone like this, you're going to the Super Bowl. That's the way I feel about it, short of like injuries coming along. All right. Pro Football Talk, off of the Cooper Kupp, it's more than rumors. I think they're willing to trade him if they get the right deal. They then said that they think that Minnesota ought to go get Matthew Stafford now, because the Rams would be signaling that they're kind of ready to move on and shift out some major parts, to which most people said, I thought Sam Darnold was playing like an MVP. And then I kind of thought about it, and I'm like, you know what? They're not really wrong. Like, it would be an extremely hyper-aggressive, very unusual thing to do, because McCarthy isn't coming back. But not unlike what I'm talking about with Washington, no one thought Minnesota would be in this position. Go look around the league. The door's wide open for them. their defense, like our offense is a surprise. Their defense is a surprise. Like that it's this good, this fast. You go put a seasoned veteran quarterback in there with that receiver, and all of a sudden, sometimes I think Florio's nuts. In this case, this is a little brilliant genius if this was actually true, to flip out Darnold to bring in Stafford on a team that's 5-1 with a defense that's playing like that, and the NFC open like this. You know what? And the other thing that might be fun for Matthew Stafford, he gets in the division with the Lions. Like, I was kind of like, you know what? It's about 3 chess moves ahead, and most of the time I feel like his moves are going to get checkmated on him. But in this case, thumbs up, Florio, tip of the cap. I like it. It's a good idea.
I think on paper, it sounds great. It sounds great if you're doing it in Madden, but you're experiencing it right now in that Washington locker room, that the chemistry is off the charts. Minnesota's probably going through the same thing. Like, they could have packed that season in before it started, and all they did was start 5-0 and then lose to the Lions, right? I don't know.
Barely.
Right. I don't know, man. To me, that's the one that messes the locker room up. Like, I know everyone likes, like, Stafford's not a bad guy, but
I don't know.
Like, that's a little crazy. Like, to have the winning record that you've got, and then you take away the leader of the team. I mean, that's a little ridiculous midseason. That's crazy.
You're one bad Sam Darnold game away from going, we should have done that.
Which
you are.
Doesn't sound far-fetched. I'll give you that.
Correct.
It doesn't sound crazy.
Let me paint one picture for you. So they're playing, I don't know, the Cardinals, and he just happens to have a 3 interception game, and they lose, and the trade deadline's passed. And you go, listen, we're still 6-3, whatever it is, but it doesn't feel right anymore. You don't feel confident with that guy anymore. So this is why I actually think, well, this is clearly not going to happen. Brilliant idea, Florio. Like, actually brilliant. And I think if you ask Stafford to be honest about it, where the Rams are, he might go, wait, I get to go knock the Lions out and make sure they don't win a Super Bowl? Sign me up for that one. I actually think he might be okay with that. Like, sign me up for that one.
The only problem there is Stafford doesn't have any ill will towards Detroit. Like, that's the thing. He actually likes them, like, brought the Super Bowl trophy to Detroit after they won. Like,
that's true.
He might, like, there's not enough venom there is what I'm getting at. Like, I'm with you. The competitor is probably going, oh, I'd love to play in that division now, because it's actually not just the Lions either.
Favre wanted to go to Minnesota to screw Green Bay.
Yes, but it's also
Mitch wanted to play for the Eagles and the Giants to screw Washington.
Yes,
and Saquon is really enjoying running all over the Giants right now.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Exactly. And now what I will say though is, if it's Stafford going, oh, I'd love to enter into that division now because Green Bay is good and the Bears are good and the Lions are good, I kind of want to just get in on the action. All right, then I'll hear you out on that. But to do it specifically for the Lions, I'm not buying it. Him and his wife have been like too involved with staying with Detroit.
Okay.
So I would say argue with me about the division if he's like, I want back in. I want a seat at the table again for that one. Okay.
I'll talk about this more tomorrow because I want to get to Ted in a minute here, but I just got to bring this up because what a incredible, bold move by the sports radio hosts of Dallas, who Jerry threatened to fire a week ago after they asked him about off-season moves that have led to Dallas not being very good here to start the season and off getting blown out at home by Detroit, and the fact that they keep getting blown out at home and giving up a bazillion points or whatever. So off of that, there's 2 ways to go. You could be semi-apologetic or try to do a nice softball interview, or double down. And they started bringing up moves he made from 3 years ago to like point out that you're making a lot of mistakes. He brought up the Amari Cooper trade, which was for a 6th round pick to save a certain amount of money that is actually under value of what receivers make now. So they got a nothing asset in return and gave up on what was a top of the market salary at the time, but didn't foresee that his salary was going to get lapped by literally everybody else. And they'd actually have a deal for him right now if they still had him. Mwah. That, you know what? I got to give these guys credit. Like, they're like, you know what? Not only are you not going to fire us, we're going to come back at you and explain to you that not only did you mess up this offseason, this started a few years ago with dumb decisions that you've made. I love it. I love it.
I think that's the number one move that I keep looking at that I thought was wonky. I remember when they made that trade, you and I on the air that year were like, why did they do that? Because it didn't make sense.
Right.
Like they
Sixth
were not
round pick. Right. I was like, what? Yeah.
and we looked at the roster and went, he's actually really good. That's a nice 1-2 combo there. And they didn't like use the money to spend elsewhere. It's not like they were up against the cap at the time. It was a really weird move. And they're right. He would have been ideal right now. Not unlike, though, as we said, they waited to sign CeeDee Lamb. They waited to sign Dak Prescott. Had he done it 3 months or 4 months ago, he would have saved money by just doing it early. But instead, for some reason, he's been waiting. He's been making bad decisions with his contracts. It's really weird.
Yeah. All right, let me take a break. I've spent too many days not bringing up Ted getting all that money. So we're going to talk about next. Brave Watch the Show, ESPN 630 Sports Capital. All right, welcome back. Ted got money. DC has followed through with their promise of, keeping them from going to Virginia. Thanks, Louise. Muriel has put in legislation, or the mayor put in legislation that I'm confused by. This is above my pay grade, and this is why I'll never work on some finance committee anywhere. The city would buy Capital One Arena back for about $87 million. So they'd own the building, but then would put in all this money to renovate the building, and Monumental would pay rental fees of somewhere between $1.3 to $3, dependent on the term of the lease. This would keep them there definitively for 20 years with options to go beyond that. But 20 years is a long time to think about whatever's going to happen with anybody. I saw some renderings of what Ted has said is going to happen. They look beautiful. I hope all this stuff does happen. The footprint's going to expand because it has to. This was the reason why I was not mad at Ted for trying to move in the first place. I'm like, guys, he needs more land to do what he's trying to do. I know it benefits him, but hey, he's the sports owner. And look, in reality, he's right. Like, to actually compete in modern sports, you have to have this bigger real estate footprint. I mean, that's what's going on, and you have to do it. He understands that, and located is a difficult spot to actually do something like that, which is why I really wasn't like totally against Virginia. I was on his side about the whole thing because I didn't think they were moving that far away. I understood what was going to happen to DC, but I wasn't against what he was doing, and I understood why he wanted to do it, but it failed. So DC has to make good on this. And if they're not going to give him RFK, and boy, his britches must be burned a little bit with what's going on with the Spirit now involved with what's to be like a commander's bill to get RFK to get both of those teams in there, which is amazing. And a whole different story. They do have to help him. And it sounds like they are going in that direction. For me to totally understand the mechanics of this and what this means for the taxpayers, I can't. I need Tom Sherwood to show up here and explain to me what's actually going on here. But all it does seem like is a make good of what they promised is happening. And it sounds extraordinarily beneficial for the Leonsis family and Monumental. But they're the ones with the product, and I don't take issue with that. And if you do, then I don't think you understand how jurisdictions work with their sports owners, because if they don't, they leave. So, this all feels very par for the course and feels like promises kept really by the city, whether you like the finances or not.
No, this is all very pro Monumental. As you said, though, you have to play ball. And on its surface, and I'm with you, like, we need Tom Sherwood here. This seems like a total loss for the taxpayers that are paying taxes in DC of why you're buying the building back. I don't know what your benefits are. I would need somebody to explain that to me. But I will say this, when it comes to the actual renovation of the arena, seeing some of those renderings, I was kind of like, finally, like it's about time we went through not just let's clean up the bowl with some new seats or whatever and a couple of new screens. They really, I don't want to use the word gut, but they need to really modernize that arena. It's a good arena with a good way to get to it, but you're looking at some of the other places around, not only the US, but I'm going to point directly at Baltimore. Like, CFG Arena completely renovated themselves to be like this premier concert venue now. And you're actually literally seeing it. You saw it on social media over the summer where major artists were not coming to DC because of all the fees involved and the way that the arena is set up. They were going to Baltimore instead of Washington. Bram, in both of our lifetimes, I've never heard of a major artist say, I'm going to Baltimore and not going to DC. That's not a slight on either city, but we all know that you usually do both cities or you come to DC if you have the choice. And so I'm saying here, I think what's happening is the city's taking a look at this and going, we need to kind of clean something up here because something's not right that we're losing major artists like Sabrina Carpenter not coming to DC, but she's going to Baltimore. That's kind of unheard of. So I think there's also something going on here as well of them going, we need to move some money around with both the city and Monumental to really upgrade this arena because we're kind of losing out on some of the non-sports things. I think that's where this is kind of emanating from. They're saying, let us handle the non-sports stuff now. You guys are going to have your dates, but we need to figure something else out here because there's money to be made.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean, I think Capital One's a very nice arena. Like, I don't really have an issue with it, which I think was part of the argument with the Virginia thing too, was like, it's not like this is the A's stadium. It's not like it's a dump or it's like from yesterday, you're like, the family has done a very nice job keeping it as up to date. It's a very good experience going to either one of the teams that you go to see down there. And the concerts are, I'll describe it as it's been fine. I've seen some major ones in recent years. I think the sound system is better. In the past, I was kind of like, this is lacking in modern in that realm. I agree with you about Baltimore. I've seen a couple shows up there. They have a legitimate, great music venue now. Not as large, as Capital One Arena. So they're not going to get the Olivia Rodrigo tours and things like that would fit 20,000 people as opposed to what they can get in that Baltimore venue. But I agree, it's a really nice one for the mid-tier size, and it's probably taking away from this. And we knew this too. I'm like, it wasn't just the Caps and Wizards leaving. Like, if Ted built that arena in Virginia, all of those music shows, none of them would be in there.
Yep. Right.
Like, the only thing that was going to happen in there were the Mystics and Dude Perfect. Like, that's it. Like, that's all that was going to happen. So, like, this cost of doing business to keep everything here. Everybody's going to make good. The city owning the building, to me, on some level is a forced reinvestment in that area because the property value goes up if, like, you fix the area in and around it, which was the chief complaint of Ted as well about what was happening. And I thought a fair complaint about crime that was occurring down there. That's on this better partner. So anyone who's complaining about this, it's the cost of doing business, and I think the city's doing the right. Personally, I think they're doing the right thing.
There's one thing here that I'll add too is the people over at Events DC, I would say over the last 5 to 10 years have done a really good job of doing unique, different kind of experiences. Like, you have Broccoli City that is now happening at Audi Field. You have festivals happening at RFK that didn't happen before. I will say this. Events DC's done a really good job of trying to do just different things, not just bringing in the same old tours or the same old artists or the horse shows or the monster truck shows, the things that you can put on the schedule normally. Those guys have actually done a really good job of kind of thinking outside the box. What can we do that's a little bit more unique? And maybe that's an argument too here from the city to Monumental of, hey, our guys have figured this out with venues that people don't think about, like not just RFK, but the parking lots at RFK that are now being used for certain things. I think there's actually something beneficial here to maybe putting it in someone else's hands of let us handle some of the non-sports stuff. We've actually been a success on doing that.
All right, last thing. Caps continue the hot start. They get Philly on a back-to-back tonight. What do you got?
Off of last night with the way they locked in defensively, I think another victory should happen tonight. I will say this, though. The Caps, they're not as old as they used to, but they still have some of those older players. The backup Philadelphia goaltender is terrible. So I will say this. I think this could be a shootout, but I think they win this one. I think they're going to win 2 in a row. Watching Philly last night, they've got some skill, but they're not as good as the Caps right now. The Caps are starting to feel kind of, I'm not going to use it this early in the season, but they've got this feel of really good team chemistry early on with a lot of new parts. So they scored 2 shorthanded goals last night, which they go to Torts, and Torts looks like he's ready to explode, essentially. It was fantastic to start the game off that way, but you're getting the scoring up and down the lineup. The decor has been really solid. I look for another Caps victory tonight. Wouldn't shock me off a back-to-back if it's a little lower scoring, but I really like the way they're playing right now.
After the Flyers collapse a year ago, if they have a really bad start, he will get fired.
Yeah.
It's a logical move.
Yeah.
Whether he deserves it or not, it's a logical move. Okay. All right. Talk to you all tomorrow. Brave Watch the Show, ESPN 630, The Sports Capital.